We have to my left Virginia A, and we have to my right Illinois A. The situation is we're playing for the championship, the 2018 NASAT. If Virginia A wins this game, they are the champions. If Illinois A wins this game, they force a one-game playoff for the championship. We'll go ahead and get started with the names, starting on the left with Virginia. Yes, and pressing the buzzer.
Justin.
Mitch.
Ethan.
Govin, G-O-V-I-N-D.
Henson, H-A-N-S-O-N.
All right, wonderful. Both teams ready? We'll go ahead and get started. Each team does have one timeout. Does either team have a substitute? No? And Illinois, you do not? Toss-up number one. Claude Debussy used the double harmonic scales in the second movement of Estampe, which evokes music from this country.
Indonesia.
Incorrect. Name 5. Finish the question. Pizzicato strings and heart in 6/8 time open the orchestrated version of the fourth movement of Maurice Ravel's Miroir Suite, which imitates music from this country. Impressions of this country inspired the second part of Debussy's Images for Orchestra, which itself has 3 sections. Many pieces imitating this country's music use a dotted 8/16, 8/8 note ostinato. A rhapsody titled for this country by Emmanuel Chabrier opens by imitating a strumming guitar. A snare drum ostinato opens a repetitive piece. That is correct for 10.
We want to protest that.
Okay. Protesting the answer of Indonesia. 1 second. Let me just mark this down.
I mean, that answer.
Okay.
And you buzzed after Estampe. Was that where they buzzed?
Can you read that?
Yes.
Yeah.
It was Claude Debussy used double harmonic scales in the second movement of Estampe. Is that where you buzzed?
No, it's right
Yeah.
From this country.
Of this country.
Indonesia. I can't find them, sir.
I got it.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we'll play the bonus. Bonus 1. These people believed that a group of the 3 daughters, including Al-Uzza and Manat, were important patrons of love, fertility, and fate. For 10 points each, name this cultural group whose mythology also included Hubal, an idol of the Quraysh tribe. What's that? Say it again. No, the Arabs. The worship of Hubal involved melomancy, the practice of divination by throwing or shooting these items with questions attached to them. Arrow is correct. And this object was believed by the pre-Islamic Arabs to be the right hand of the god Al-Rahman. It is currently kissed in the Islam ritual as part of the Hajj. Answer? No, it is the black stone of the Kaaba. Sound bonus. Toss-up 2. A. Arenaria was first introduced to the West Coast in order to stabilize these structures. Exposure in the vegetative skins of these features can result in blowout formations. The endangered species Celoporus arenopoulos is commonly named for these features. Heathlands are climax communities that begin with marram grass growing on these structures. Zybars are longitudinal examples of these geological features that lack discernible slip bases. Surface creep and aeolian saltation are 2 processes that help form them, and one crescent-shaped example of these features.
A dune.
That is correct for a dune or sand dunes even. Your bonus. While in Argentina, the protagonist of this book writes letters to his friends and family claiming that all Germans in Buenos Aires are all soccer players, psychoanalysts, or cigarette girls. For 10 points each, name this first novel by Anne Carson, who loosely adapts fragments of Stesichorus to tell of a romance between Geryon and Heracles.
It's like pink red or something?
Just guess.
Pink red?
No, it is Autobiography of Red.
Oh.
In Autobiography of Red, Heracles and Ankush's quest to record the sounds of volcanoes was inspired by a poem by this writer that ends, "The only secret people keep is immortality. She also wrote that hope is the thing with feathers.
Oh, second.
Dickinson.
Dickinson is correct, Emily Dickinson. And finally, the introduction to autobiography of Red notes that Stesichorus came after Homer and before this poet, who was a difficult interval for a poet. She wrote Tinder Buttons.
Oh, no. That was Stein.
Gertrude Stein is correct for 20. Toss-up 3. In a novel from this country, an elderly woman declares her interest in eliminating woodworm from furniture, and that woman's anthropologist son becomes the love interest of the spinster protagonist. In another novel from this country, an aristocratic girl is ostracized for becoming engaged to her freshly widowed uncle, who is nicknamed the lecherous lecturer. A woman complains about having seen something nasty in the woodshed in a novel from this country about Flora Post, who visits her relatives, the Starkadders, in the countryside. The James Tate Black Memorial Prize is awarded in this setting of the novels Excellent Women and Love in a Cold Climate by Barbara Pym and Nancy Mitford, respectively. For 10 points,
Like England?
that is correct. Your bonus. The optic nerve can be negatively affected by pressure from pituitary tumors, causing tunnel vision. For 10 points each, this occurs because the pituitary gland is right next to this structure in which parts of the optic nerve cross the midline to create the two optic tracts.
Looks like.
Answer?
Thalamus.
No, it is the optic chiasm.
Oh,
The optic nerve runs information to the brain that is gathered by this part of the eye. Bipolar and amacrine cells are found in this structure, which also contains the macula and the fovea.
Yeah, retina.
Retina is correct. And the optic nerve runs to this nucleus in the thalamus, which has 6 layers. The first 2 layers of this structure takes magnocellular inputs.
No, that's in the uterus.
Answer? Time. Lateral geniculate nucleus, or LGN, so 10 on the bonus. Toss-up 4. In 2015, protesters against this man chanted, "Put some fingers on those hands. Give us work by Paul Gauguin," in protest to the overabundance of his paintings. Those protesters claimed that this man sucks at painting. A painting by this man shows a woman in a pink dress looking down as a bearded man in blue leads her in the title Dance at Bougival. This artist painted a girl in a blue dress holding a stick and the title Toy and Girl with Hoop, and he painted an ivy-climbed metal railing behind the title Girls wearing floral decorated hats.
Renoir.
Renoir is correct for 10. Your bonus. Golden neck rings known as torques were found in the V example of these things, discovered in 1930 near the River Seine, which are an important Bronze Age site. For 10 points each, name these places where ancient cultures often buried objects that were believed to be of use in the afterlife.
Just go see.
Graveyards.
Incorrect. The answer is graves or tombs.
Okay.
The next part, the item from the V graves overlap the end of the Hallstatt culture and the early periods of this archaeological culture, named for a site beside Lake Neuchâtel. Answer? Time. I'm sorry. No, the Latin or Latin culture. And the most famous artifact found in the V graves was the largest bronze example of these Grecian mixing vessels, which were used at a symposium to dilute wine with water.
Okay, what mixing this? Would that be urn?
Answer? No, these are craters. So 0 on bonus. Toss of 5. Hannah Arendt analyzed this section of text in terms of the subjection of political action to contemplation. In The Essence of Truth, Martin Heidegger argued that this passage marked a switch from conceiving truth as concealment to correctness. The speaker in this section refers to it later when defining the role of guardians of the polis from ages 35 to 50. This passage builds on an analogy of the son as a child of goodness and follows the analogy of the divided line. In dialogue with Glaucon, it's... yes, that's correct. Allegory of the cave for 10 points. Your bonus.
Sorry.
Borders in this town are marked by stone lines with white crosses on every other stone. For 10 points each, name this town. Since the Treaty of Maastricht, it contains a series of complex Belgian exclaves and Dutch counter-exclaves, with some of them only building size.
I'm sure. Right up.
No, it is Barla, or Barla. Thanks to this agreement, the Barla borders are only a hassle for residents. No one can walk between countries without controls. Though Switzerland is not part of the EU, it is part of this agreement, which allows people to freely cross borders within its namesake area. That is correct, Shenzhen. Shenzhen. Words are hard. A notable absence in the Shenzhen area is this microstate between France and Spain, the only of the European microstates to retain border controls and not have de facto open borders. It is jointly ruled by a Spanish bishop and the French president. Andorra is correct for 20 on the bonus. Toss-up 6. One man with this name was a neighbor and colleague of Samuel Pepys, who compared him to a counterfeit rogue and false knave in the diary entry. Another man of this name was arrested with William Mead after deliberately defying the Conventicle Act and authored the pamphlets Truth Exalted and the Sandy Foundation Shaken.
10.
That is correct, William Penn for 10 points. Your bonus. This man's son described him as a clever, disappointed man who, though he introduced his son to poetry, was ultimately frustrated by his job as an English teacher in Wales. For 10 points each, identify this man. He inspired a poem that describes how this person's blind eyes could blaze like meteors. Answer? I'm sorry? No, it is Dylan Thomas's father, or David John Thomas. That poem, Do Not Go Gentle Into That Good Night, is in this poetic form of 19 lines, typically including 2 refrains. One art by Elizabeth Bishop is also in this form. Villanelle is correct for 10. Another Thomas poem opines that this entity shall have no dominion. A Yeats poem opening, I know that I shall meet my fate, is titled for an Irish airman who foresees this thing. That is correct. Death is correct for 20. Toss-up 7. A character in this novel begins to act out resentments toward her husband by spitting in his glass and threatening to use her friend's urine the next time. Near the end of this novel, Adam undergoes a circumcision and scarring ritual in solidarity with a native African girl, Tashi. A character in this novel has to spend 12 years working as a maid for the mayor after responding hell no to Miss Millie. Characters in this novel make a quote out of curtains torn apart during a fight between Sophia and Harpo. The missionaries Samuel and Corinne adopt the color purple is correct for 10. Your bonus? The Ishihara-Hadwiger formula allows one to calculate this value for any hard convex body. For 10 points each, name this value that can be solved for by integrating over the Mayer F function. It describes deviation from the ideal gas law due to pairwise potential. Incorrect, the second viral coefficient. Next part, the second viral coefficient goes to 0 at a temperature named for this man. This man also names a law stating that pressure and volume are inversely proportional under constant temperature for an ideal gas. Boyle is correct, Robert, Boyle. And finally, for van der Waals' equation of state, the second viral coefficient can be expressed in terms of A and B. The cubic equation of state further modifies the A and B parameters and predicts a critical compressibility factor of 1/3. This cubic equation. I'm sorry? Read the Kwong is correct for 20 on the bonus. Timeout has been called. Teams will have 10 minutes. We'll get a score check here in a second. 10 minutes, yes. I'm very tired. It's nap time.
10 minutes?
No, 1 minute. God, I was joking on.
So, I mean, like that, but you know what, the ultimate is going to be awesome. We'll get that. We'll get that. It can't be so that's how you do it.
Yes.
You know what?
Right now?
Yeah, please, yeah. She's got to go. I'm asking for a reason. I don't just hate Olivia. But she knows I'm one.
Unless you.
I don't think so. If you did, I'll put it on The current score is Virginia A 110, Illinois A 55.
You got 110?
Yeah, no, I think you're right.
110 for Illinois or Virginia, 55 for Illinois.
You have 100 for them. Oh no, sorry. One test right. I gave them. I'm sorry. I didn't update this one. 100 times correct.
Great. Cool.
Okay.
All right, time is up.
No,
Going back to the previous protest, that protest is denied. It's my understanding, let me go back to the question, that the first movement is for Indonesia, but the second is Spain. Did I have that in the right order? Yeah.
I'm sorry. I didn't follow that.
The question mentions, hold on. Okay,
The second movement.
the second movement, which is of Spain. The first movement of that piece is of Indonesia.
Could you read that?
Yes, Claude Debussy used double harmonic scales in the second movement of Estampe.
Okay.
All right, cool.
Thank you.
Great. You're welcome.
Yeah, I hope we have this.
All right, we're good now. Timeout is over. We are proceeding to toss-up number 8. Best of luck. Trypanosoma cruzi uses lamp 2 on these organelles for host invasion. The Philippine test detects deficiency in a lipid transporter in the membrane of these organelles that inhibits Ebola virus entry, but also results in devastating cholesterol accumulation. Multilamellar myeloid inclusions called zebra bodies appear in these organelles in alpha-gal A deficiency. Imaglucerase, or a cerezyme, replaces a defective enzyme in this organelle that causes tissue paper macrophages. GM2A presents gangliosides to an enzyme in these organelles. Late endozymes fuse with these organelles and deliver mannose 6-phosphate.
Lysosome.
Lysosome is correct for 10 points. Your bonus. J.P. Morgan strongly advocated hiring this baritone as a soloist in order to integrate St. George's Episcopal Church, leading to this man's signature performance of Fares' The Palms on every Palm Sunday. For 10 points each, name this American singer, composer, and vocal coach, who created 6 plantation melodies for violin and piano, and hymns such as In Christ There Is No East or West, while transmitting black musical traditions at the National Conservatory.
Do you know?
Answer?
Leclerc, got it.
What's it?
Leclerc.
No, it's Harry Burley.
Oh.
Burley transmitted several of this kind of song, which were often recorded by the Fisk Jubilee singers, and include Wade in the Water and Swing Low, Sweet Chariot.
Spirituals.
Spirituals is correct. This composer, then the director of the National Conservatory, encountered Burley singing while working as a maintenance man at the conservatory to pay his tuition, and adapted several of his songs in his symphony from the New World. Dvorak is correct for 20 on the bonus. Toss of 9. The Babylonian Talmud attributes this man's death. Thank you. This man's death, like Nimrod's, to a fly entering his nose and devouring his brain for 7 years. During this man's inaugural games, wooden balls were thrown into the crowd of spectators inscribed with redemption coupons for gold and slaves. This man divorced his wife, Marcia Fornia, because her uncle, Maria Soranus, became a martyr of the Stoic opposition. This ruler faced a rebellion led by the lute-playing Terentius Maximus, who claimed he was Nero. Upon assuming the throne, this emperor abandoned his affair with Berenice, the daughter of King Herod Agrippa I. This emperor's namesake arch commemorates Titus is correct for 10. On several occasions, Polish commanders were inspired by Venice to carry out ceremonies of marriage to the sea. For 10 points each, Joseph Haller carried out a marriage to the sea at Puck in Pomerania, which was granted to Poland by this treaty signed with Germany following World War I. The Treaty of Versailles. A marriage to the sea ceremony during World War II was carried out at Coburg, which was the subject of a Nazi propaganda film about its defense during this conflict. The prolonged siege of Coburg during this conflict was lifted by the Treaty of Tilsit. Napoleonic Wars is correct. In 1945, members of these Polish light cavalry units performed marriages to the sea on horseback at Morzezno. By the time of World War II, they were armed with rifles rather than their typical lances. What's that? No, those are Uhlans. Oh, 20 on the bonus. Toss up 10, last of the half. The former head of this company dated a violinist who was once insulted by T.J. Miller at the Crunchy Awards. In 2017, an employee of this company sent an email saying he would not even utter the name of Donald Trump because he did not accept him as his leader. A head of this company was filmed telling an employee that some people don't like to take responsibility for their own shit, and he later apologized and said he needed to fundamentally change as a leader. Uber is correct for 10. Your bonus. Lynn Thorndike wrote an 8-volume treatise on the relationship between this practice and experimental science. For 10 points each, name this practice which Giovanni Pico della Mirandola linked with Kabbalah and advocated as a means to achieve union with God. Pico's oration on the dignity of man contrasts a beneficial form of this practice with the harmful Goetia, or Goetia.
Flagellating.
Answer?
Flagellating.
No, magic. Another major trend in Renaissance humanism was the revival of Epicureanism, spurred in part by Poggio Bracciolini's rediscovery of this Roman philosopher's poem on the nature of things. Answer? Lucretius is correct. This philosopher rejected the use of magic because of its emphasis on individual skill and individual gains. He dismissed poor idols and promoted empirical science in his Novum Organum. Bacon is correct for 20. That's the half. We'll have a minute's break.
The score is 170 for Virginia A, 85 for Illinois A.
We have it. Okay, it just takes 3 tosses.
Very good.
Better.
We need one more of those. Good luck, Joe.
Yeah.
But we are still. That's waiting. I mean, your timing is just right. I was going to say they're kind of doing the same thing. So you are seeing that shit. That's the exact right time.
Just stop
That was the
recording.
exact right time. You probably had it down to one.
Is it still recording?
So that's how you're out there. We are taking that. Keep that up.
That's the half. We'll resume with the game.
Good luck.
Do we have a score check again, just as a reminder?
Score is 170 Virginia A, 85 Illinois
Wonderful. Thank you, up here. We have 10 toss-ups and bonuses left. Best of luck to both teams. Virginia still has a timeout. Illinois has used it. Toss-up 11. Geraldus Cambrensis records that the Tyrconnell kingdom consecrated its monarch reign by having him have sex with one of these animals, boil it, and eat it with only his mouth. Georges Dumazel argued that the range of the sacrifice of this animal suggests it was a rite of the Indo-Europeans. In a ritual which is banned in the Kali Yuga, this animal was allowed to roam for a year.
Horses.
Horses is correct for 10 points, your bonus. In the so-called Octopus aria, one of this composer's characters seems to describe the infamous artwork, The Dream of the Fisherman's Wife. For 10 points each, name this operatic composer, whose works include Amico Fritz, and the aforementioned Iris.
You like
Answer?
Charpentier.
Pietro Mosconi is correct. That is incorrect for answer. Mosconi is by far best known for composing this classic verissimo opera, which is often performed on a cav-pag double bill with Leon Cavallo's I Pagliacci. It also includes a celebrated intermezzo.
Cavaliero Rusticana.
Cavaliera Rusticana is correct. After returning from the army, this protagonist of Cavaliera Rusticana sleeps with Santuza, which leads to him being killed by Alfio in a duel. Answer? No. Torito.
Okay.
10 on the bonus.
That was-
Toss-up 12. During a plebiscite over this set of programs, separate voting booths were set up for yes and no voters to publicly enter. This set of initiatives targeted the elite 1,000 families and included the nationalization of forests and a proposal for worker profit sharing. This initiative broke up the Vox system and created 2.5 million new landowners and a very popular literacy corps. The 15 Cordade protests opposed this set of initiatives, and an attempt to suppress criticism of this program led to the storming of the Faizayi White Revolution. Is correct for 10. Your bonus. This program produced the American Guide series, a collection of guides to the states. For 10 points each, name this program of the Works Progress Administration, which put authors to work, producing things like the aforementioned guidebooks or oral histories of slavery by talking to still living former slaves. The Federal Writers Project is correct. The Works Progress Administration was part of this much broader FDR program fighting the Great Depression.
New Deal.
New Deal is correct. And finally, the Federal Writers Project was a frequent target of Congressman Martin Dees, the chair of this investigative committee, which in a revived form later heard testimony from men like Whittaker Chambers. Was that?
HUAC.
Yes, HUAC or HUAC is correct. 20 on, or 30 on the bonus, my apologies. Cause of 13. The corrosion of gyros on this device led to the adoption of pressurized nitrogen instead of oxygen for suspension fluid. One project carried out with this device was entitled Candles. A system of mirrors called CoStar placed some of this tool's instruments. Its successor is named after James Webb.
The Hubble telescope.
Yes, that's correct. The Hubble. 10. Your bonus. In this technique, intermittent contact mode can be used to reduce lateral forces on the scanning tip. For 10 points each, name this technique where a very sharp tip is dragged across the surface to image its topography.
Oh, what? Okay, what would like you use to image topography?
Answer? Time, no answer given. Atomic force microscopy. One variant of atomic force microscopy measures the variation in work function across a surface and is usually named after this scientist. An equation named for this scientist describes the vapor pressure changes at a curved interface.
This is
Answer?
Kelvin.
That is correct,
Okay.
Kelvin or William Thomson. And finally, a limitation of non-contact atomic force microscopy is that it must take place in one of these environments. Interstellar space is a near perfect one of these environments, while a relatively weak one can be created by pumping out air from a bell jar.
Vacuum.
Vacuum is correct, 20 on the bonus. Toss-up 14. A character in this... Thank you. A character in this play stews up a concoction to give Diana the dog an abortion. Is it? Yes, Mr. Lee is correct for 10. Your bonus. This painter's The Ice Hole depicts the opening carved out of a frozen lake in Maine. For 10 points each, name this modernist painter who wanted to be the official portrait painter of Mount Katahdin. He also painted lobster fishermen.
Poppy?
Say it.
Say it, Palmer.
Was that?
Palmer.
No, it is Hartley. Marston Hartley. This painter depicted villagers skating on the ice as the title figures run in the foreground of hunters in the snow. He also painted landscape with the fall of Icarus.
Okay. Bruegel.
Yes, prompt.
The Elder.
Yes, Bruegel the Elder is correct. In this artist's sea of ice, a ship could be seen keeled over to the right amidst the cracked sheet. He also painted two men contemplating the moon. Answer?
Turner.
No, it's Friedrich. Timeout has been called 10 on the bonus. That is after 14. We'll get a score check, and we'll have a minute for the timeout.
The score is 210 for Virginia A, 155 Illinois A.
That's
Sorry.
We'll have another score check with 3 tosses remaining.
Yes. 55 or something? Yeah, 60. No, 55. I can't do math. Why yet? I just told her we know. Okay, so
I don't care what it's going to be.
2 more than that. Okay, so like don't sit, but you're gonna get it. Okay.
I always want them to do every time. Every single time.
2-1. Timeout is over. That is the last timeout of the game. We are getting ready for toss-up number 15. Best of luck to both teams. We will have a toss-up, or a score check before toss-up number 18. Toss-up 15. Ovid describes how this hero used a spear to pin a monster to a tree, causing that oak to break under its weight. The account of Apollodorus differs from that of Homer's in suggesting that Amphion and Zethus enhanced rather than carried out an achievement of this man. Late in his life, this man and his wife returned into serpents. This man led to a group of 5.
Cadmus.
Cadmus is correct for 10. Your bonus. Since the person entrusted with erasing a manuscript of this author's plays apparently got tired halfway through, his plays beginning with letters towards the start of the alphabet are worse preserved than those later in the alphabet. For 10 points each, name this early Roman comic playwright who wrote The Pot of Gold and Menachem. both including large numbers of stock characters. I'm sorry. Spell that for me.
Plautus.
Yes, that is correct. Plautus. One of Plautus's comedies is titled for an overconfident member of this profession called Pyrgo Polonices, who ends up being beaten toward the end of that play after he keeps Philocomasium imprisoned in his house. Soldier. And this other play by Plautus centers on the pimp Labrix, who ends up accidentally delivering a slave prostitute to her own father. It also features a delusional fisherman who intends to found a city in his own name after catching a large trunk in his net. Answer? Rope is the correct answer. 10 on the bonus. Class of 16. A recent line of research that builds from Per Martin Luff's intuitionistic theory of these things tries to use them for the univalent foundations of mathematics by extending the notion of homotopy to them. That theory of these things has been put forth by Vladimir Voyevodsky. The lambda calculus without these things can be thought of as really being the lambda calculus with only one of these things. One can convert an object from one of these things to another using a... I'm sorry? Incorrect. Make 5. Using a double equal sign in JavaScript, known as coercion. Programming languages that check these things at compile time or runtime are classified as statically or dynamically thinged, respectively. For 10 points, name this classification, which identifies what kind of data is represented by a value, such as float, real, or boolean.
Type.
Type is correct for 10. Your bonus. This heresy spread widely thanks to a series of evidently catchy songs that were popular with sailors. For 10 points each, name this heretical Christology, formulated by an Alexandrian preacher, which claims that the Son of God was begotten within time and is subordinate to God the Father.
Arianism.
Arianism is correct. Arianism stands in contrast to this orthodox doctrine of God, which states that the Godhead is composed of 3 equal, eternal, and distinct hypostases of 4 persons sharing one unified ousia or essence.
Okay, Trinitarianism.
That is correct, or Trinity. And this monophysite heretical Christology affirmed that Christ was of 2 natures, but no longer in 2 natures, postulating that his divine nature subsumed his human nature like a drop of vinegar in the ocean. It was explicitly rejected by the Council of Chalcedon.
My opposite heresy?
No, it's Eutychianism. So 20 on the bonus, is that correct? Yes, 20 on the bonus. Toss-up number 17. One of these 2 people charmed the other by using the phrase "we authors" to indicate a common bond. Upon one of these people's death, the other sent primroses to the funeral, an action that gave the Primrose League its name. A law championed by one of these people led the younger one to sign letters using the Latin initials R and I. In speaking to Matthew Arnold, one of these people explained his relationship with the other as laying flattery on with a trowel. The older of these people introduced the Royal Titles Act to please the younger one. One of these 2 people had a more fractious relationship with the other's rival, the leader of the Liberal Party. For 10 points... I'm sorry? That's incorrect. Name 5. Finish it. For 10 points, name these 2 British leaders, a conservative prime minister of Jewish descent and his queen.
Benjamin Disraeli and Queen Victoria.
That is correct for 10 points. Your bonus. This book identifies 4 additional puzzles to its title, including missing information, political awareness, and legal failure. For 10 points each, name this 2000 book by economist Fernando de Soto, which advocates creating strong property rights regimes for the poor in order to bring the benefits of modern economic systems to the Third World.
Why countries fail?
Repeat?
Why countries fail?
No, the mystery of capital. The 5th mystery identified by De Soto is the lack of global awareness of this common field of study, which De Soto says must be understood to comprehend how capitalism developed within it. Frederick Jackson Turner wrote about the significance of the frontier in this thing, which is studied by Eric Honer and Howard Zinn.
History?
Prompt.
Oh, American history.
American history is correct. And a critique by De Soto of this 2013 book notes that its statistics leave out the informal economy that dominates in 90% of the world, and claims that the Arab Spring was in part a revolt against weak protections of property rights for the poor. This book proposes a crisis arising when R is greater than G.
I don't.
Okay.
Answer?
Why countries fail?
What's that?
Why countries fail?
No, it's capital in the 21st century. I'll count the bonus.
That's fine.
And we'll get a score check real quick.
The score after 17 toss-ups is 220 Virginia A, 205 Illinois A.
Very close game. Continuing on with toss-up 18, best of luck for both teams. A building of this type was designed in 3 concentric square rings, with the outer ring made of load-bearing red brick, and the innermost ring being a central atrium, with 4 large circular holes in its concrete walls, revealing the different floors of the middle ring. Another building of this type features bright red hallways and yellow.
Library?
Library is correct for 10 points. Your bonus. Africa's first peaceful democratic transfer of power occurred in this country when Aden Ade lost the 1967 presidential elections to Abdir Rashid Ali Shermarki. For 10 points each, name this one-time failed state in the Horn of Africa where soldiers under Mohammed Farah Adid shot down a U.S. Black Hawk helicopter during the 1993 Battle of Mogadishu.
Somalia.
Somalia is correct. The Somali Civil War began after Adid and other warlords rose up against this Somali leader. This dictator's regime declined after his defeat in the Ogaden War.
Siad Barre.
Barre is correct, and Somalia fought the Ogaden War against this communist regime bolstered by thousands of Cuban troops and Soviet advisors. This Ethiopian junta were led by Mengistu Haile Mariam.
The Derg.
Derg is correct for 30 on the bonus. Toss-up 19. This adjective appears in the title of a book which discusses the conflict between moral God and river God in Huckleberry Finn. Claims that the Kinsey Report reduced sexuality from a social to a physical fact and ends with the meaning of a literary idea. George Dangerfield argued that the confluence of 4 great rebellions in the early 1910s led to the strange death of this kind of England. And Lionel Krilling's essay collection is titled For This Kind of Imagination.
Victorian?
Incorrectly, 5. Finish it out. For this kind of imagination. This word describes a political approach based on empathy and incrementalism that needs no philosophical foundation, according to Contingency, Irony, and Solidarity by Richard Rorty. For 10 points, give this term describing political parties committed to classical ideals of the Enlightenment, such as the governing parties of Australia and Canada.
Liberal.
Liberal is correct for 10 points. Your bonus. Shortly before this word is repeated several times, one character asks, why should a dog or a horse or a rat have life, but not you? For 10 points each, give this word, which is notably repeated 5 times in a row in Act 5, Scene 3 of a Shakespeare play, just before the title character dies.
5 times? Just say 3.
Just say 5.
Oh, answer?
Tomorrow.
Never.
Never.
Not tomorrow. That line comes from the dying speech of this character, which follows the death of his daughter, Cordelia. This royal decides to share his inheritance between his other 2 daughters, Goneril and Regan, leading to a tragic sequence of events.
King Lear.
King Lear is correct. Along with Gloucester's son, Edgar, 2 noble characters are present when Lear dies, up to the end of the play. Name either of them.
Yeah.
Just name one. You think it might be. It was Edmund.
Answer.
Edmund.
I'm sorry?
Edmund.
No, the Duke of Albany or the Earl of Kent.
Okay, Earl.
Pen on that one.
Sorry.
Last toss-up of the game. This man designs a trap for the King of the Ravens, who is forced to watch corn grow, but ultimately killed by this man's rival, the inventor of dice games, Pop Puck Kiwis. This character uses a magic canoe that moves without paddles, but does get stuck on a sandbar until Quasnid assists. This character is told by a woodpecker that he can fire arrows directly at the top of Pearlfeather's head. Hiawatha is correct for 10 points. And your bonus. This theorem guarantees that for 2-person zero-sum games, there is a value B, such that player 1 can always gain at least B, and player 2 can always lose at most B's. B. For 10 points each, name this theorem central to game theory that was proven by John von Neumann.
Yes.
Minimax is correct. A game is described by this adjective when the value is 0. Martingales can be used to model this type of game for which a player is not expected to win or lose anything. No, a fair game. And a strategy furnished by the minimax theorem will occur at one of these points for the payoff function. At these points, both partial derivatives are 0, but the function has a maximum in one direction and a minimum in the other. Saddle point is correct, 20 on the bonus, and that is the game.
The final score is 245 Virginia A, 265 Illinois A.